So the first question I had was from Debbie, and she asked, I would like a better sense of what to expect with a 6-year-old. We have learned the phonograms and we've started working on the lists. We are at list E. He's starting to get the idea of sounding out words, gluing and ungluing, and knowing which phonograms might be used to make the proper sounds. He's getting the dictation to a degree, but the retention really isn't there. I've sort of been plowing ahead, introducing new concepts with the hopes that some of it will stick, and that we will repeat these lists next year. There will be more retention. When we repeat, there will be more retention. But I'm operating more on faith than any sense of surety. So let's talk about Debbie's question. She's working with a 6-year-old. All right, so let me just say to Debbie, first of all, he's 6. Okay, so he's still very young. And he is just starting this process of having his brain trained for understanding how the written code works. So we need to give him lots and lots of grace for this learning process. A lot of times we teachers think that just because we tell the children or students, and maybe even older students, I told you once, you should understand that. And that's not how learning happens. Learning happens in layers. We learn something, we forget, or maybe I should say we hear it, we forget, we hear it again. All right, so let me just say to Debbie, first of all, he's 6, okay? So he's still very young, and he is just starting this process of having his brain trained for understanding how the written code works. So we need to give him lots and lots of grace for this learning process. A lot of times we teachers think that just because we tell the children or students, and maybe even older students, I told you once, you should understand that. And that's not how learning happens. Learning happens in layers. We learn something, we forget, or maybe I should say we hear it. We forget, we hear it again, we forget, we do it, we play with it, we go, oh, I think I'm starting to get this, and then we kind of don't really get it. And then the more and more we work with it and practice it, the more that actually sinks in and learning occurs. And so this is a little guy, he's just getting started, and he's only been exposed, let's see, to up to 100. She says we're at list E. So by the time you get to the end of list E, you've introduced 100 words. That's not enough for this little guy to understand the process. So that's why you're not seeing retention, because he hasn't been given enough for it to make its way into his brain and be able to be used. So you got to keep plowing ahead. He needs a larger pool of words for it to make sense. So you got to keep going. Your goal is that this is going to become an automatic process. It's not going to be something he has to stop and think about and, okay, here's the word. That's something we do when we come across a word we don't know. But you're exposing him to the high frequency words, and you're going to get to the point, not right now, he's just getting started, but you're going to get to the point where this becomes an automatic process, where the brain is automatically able to see those words, process them, decode at lightning speeds. For writing, it's just going to be, his mind is going to be able to go to the thoughts that he's trying to communicate in writing, and he doesn't have to think about, well, you know, the word live, do I put an E at the end? He's going to know it, but he has to experience this process so much more than what he's already got. So I just want to commend you. It sounds like you've done a really great job so far, and just keep with it. Yes, keep moving, keep plowing. I love that word. Your goal this first year with him is exposure. Think of your first year with the program, with really any student, is immersion. So you want to work at a nice quick pace, because the goal is to get him going with the process over and over and over, seeing how these rules work, working with the phonograms, practicing them every day. The goal is constant immersion with the ideas. And so if we slow down, that's not going to happen. So you want to keep going. You're doing a great job. Look in your Spell to Write and Read book at page 64, and there is a chart on this page. It's right here. And it gives you kind of a big picture. So you can see where you started with him. I'm not sure if you're calling him a first grader or if you're thinking of him as a kindergartner. Doesn't matter. But just look at this and get an idea for how you're going to repeat the lists each year. You're going to repeat that material. So the first time through, we're exposing them. We're getting this idea. They're seeing the rules over and over, and we're exposing them. Next time, we're going to come back and pick them up. We might be doing some different kinds of reinforcement activities with those words, but we're going to come back and pick them up, and we can work more on mastery the second time after they've had some experience with those words. So take a look at SWR page 64, and that'll give you an idea of, kind of give you the big picture of how you want to proceed. So just know that mastery is going to come as you keep reviewing, and we're not expecting a 6-year-old only at list E to be retaining any of this. So in fact, like for example, the first time you teach the constant vowel chart, a lot of that information just goes right over the head. That's with the adults. When I teach seminars, they feel like, oh my gosh, I just got hit by a wave. I don't really understand what you just, I know the words, I know what you just said, but I don't really understand this. And the first time I start saying, okay, we learned this, how do we mark this word? Because we learned the markings on that page. They're like, wait a minute, I'm supposed to actually use this information. So it's overwhelming. And so my expectation is, I just introduced it. That's it. I introduced the information, and now as we get into the spelling word list, we're going to start using it. And at the beginning, I'll be helping him, I'll be guiding him, I'll be prompting him, but then he's going to start getting it, and he's going to start saying, wait a minute, I know how to mark that word, or I know what's happening, or I recognize a phonogram, and so he's going to take more and more ownership. So I promise you that's going to happen. You just got to keep going. Let me just make one comment that I just caught as I reread your question. You said he's beginning to have some success at knowing which phonograms might be used to make the proper sounds. So I just want to say there's two things about that. First of all, when you teach a word, you're going to give him everything he knows to spell it correctly when he goes to write it. There's going to not be any guessing, okay? So for example, let's say we have the word heat, or no, let's say we have the word meat, okay? Meat. Well, how do you spell that? Well, it could be spelled eat meat with E-A, as in I eat meat, or it could be spelled eat E-double-E. Could be that too. So which is it? Do I say, well, guess? No, because I want him to have everything he needs to know when he goes to spell that word. I want him to have all the information. I'm teaching. I'm giving him the information. So I will tell him in that dictation process, we had meat at our dinner last night. Meat. Sound it out, and then we go through the process, and then I'll say, use E-A. I tell him so that when he goes to write it, he knows, he's equipped, he knows what sounds. Now, when I don't do that is when I have trained him. Notice training has occurred. Not the first time. I have to keep working through it. When he should know, because of the training we've done, what is the first phonogram he should think of when he hears that sound. For example, when he hears k, there are, I think, 5 different ways to spell k. We can use the C. We can use the K, we can use CH, we can use CK. Now, of course, we don't use letter names like that, but I'm just saying there's multiple ways to spell that. But the most common is the K-S phonogram. So when I say K, his brain should think K-S. That's it. C usually says K. Okay? Now, there's more to that rule, but listen to that rule. C usually says K. So I'm saying what it usually says, and I'm also saying what's the phonogram that usually says that. So he should be automatic on those. Now, of course, that takes training. You have to remind him. All right, you heard, what's the phonogram that we usually use when we hear that? And if it's not that, I need to tell him. So let's say I have the word kick. Kick. Oh, it's k, I, k. Now, this multi-letter phonogram has a k in it, but that's not the phonogram I'm using there. This is a multi-letter phonogram. And this is not k. So when I'm dictating the word kick, I have to clarify. Please use k. And I might say to a young student, the tall k. I, k. And then I have to clarify because I have two different multi-letter phonograms. By the time the student has learned the two-letter k, he's learned two multi-letter phonograms that can say that sound. He's learned ch, k, sh, and he's learned the two-letter k. So I need to clarify so that when he goes to write, he knows this is k, he knows I, and he knows this one. So I just want to make sure when you say he's knowing which phonograms might be used, make sure you're clarifying for him any time there could be confusion. Anytime a phonogram does not say its first sound. So when you hear ah, what's the most common spelling of ah? We're going to use ah, o, oo. Okay, how about the word ball? Ball, ah. We're going to use ah. It's not spelled with ah, o, oo. So when I dictate ball, b, ah, o, use ah, a, ah. So I have to clarify for the student so that he knows, oh, it's not the most common because I've been trained to know when I hear ah, I use ah, o, oo, unless my teacher tells me otherwise.